So today we're going to discuss complex sentences. So first, let's go ahead and take a look at what is a complex sentence. So complex sentence is any sentence that joins a dependent clause with an independent clause. Remember, independent clauses have a subject, have a verb, and express a complete thought. A dependent clause may have something that looks like a subject, something that looks like the verb, but it will never ever express a complete thought. Okay, so in this video, we're only really going to look at dependent clauses that begin with subordinating conjunctions. So think of subordinating conjunctions as because words. You don't have to remember that big old fat word if you don't care to. If you do, that's great. Maybe you'll be on a game show sometime and you'll be able to pull that out. But just think of them as because words. And go ahead and pause the video right now so you can go ahead and jot all these words down, because it'll really help you as you try to punctuate things correctly in your own writing. So here are a couple of examples of complex sentences. So first of all, I went to the store because I ran out of milk. In this case, because I ran out of milk is our dependent clause. If I just said because I ran out of milk, period, and I left the room, you would be standing there wondering, like, what the heck? Because you ran out of milk, what did you do? Did you kill somebody? Did you drink blood? What did you do? They want to know. In this case, it's great. I just went to the store. I didn't do any of those things. But you have to pair dependent clauses together with independent clauses in order for it to make sense. So we have the flip side of the same sentence in following. It says, because I ran out of milk, I went to the store. Okay, and again, in this case, because I ran out of milk is our dependent clause. We can't just simply put a period right after, even a semicolon. Remember, semicolons act the same way periods do. So we need to utilize some other punctuation in this case. So one more example is, Sam registered for 4 classes, even though his advisor only recommended 3. In this case, even though his advisor only recommended 3 is our dependent clause, which begins with that because word, even though. Again, that can't stand on its own. I'll say, well, even though his advisor only recommended 3, okay, what happened now? Okay, let's look at the flip side of this sentence. Even though Sam's advisor recommended 3 classes, comma, he registered for 4. In this case, again, we have the same dependent clause beginning with the same because words, even though, and that can't stand on its own. So we punctuate complex sentences. It's actually a very simple rule. Okay, there's 3 particular steps. First, you need to identify the dependent clause. So find your because phrase. Where is it? And I would go ahead and take your highlighter. So if you have your rough draft, take your highlighter and highlight that whole because phrase. And just beware, sometimes there are multiple because phrases together. So if you see multiple because phrases together, go ahead and highlight all of those or give it a little circle or underline. Then what you're going to do is you're going to see if the dependent clause comes before the independent clause, you're going to put a comma between the two. So basically, if we're starting out the sentence, you need to put a comma before you get to that independent clause. And then if the dependent clause comes after the independent clause, you don't use any commas. So if you start with that independent clause, no commas are needed at all. So let's go ahead and practice this. Do you think that the following sentence needs a comma? Let's go ahead and look. So when the semester is over, I'm going on vacation. Does this need any punctuation in here to make it more correct? Okay, so first step, identify the because word or the because phrase. Underline that whole puppy in your head. I would not recommend writing on your computer screen or your phone screen, but if you need to, go ahead. That's wonderful. It's yours. Don't write on my tablets that I gave you. Okay, then you need to ask, does it come before the independent clause? If so, you need to put a comma between the two. If not, no commas needed. So go ahead and pause this video and work this sentence out. And yeah, hopefully you're right. I'm going to assume you're right, so excellent job. But when the semester is over, comma, I am going on vacation. So you'll see that in the white is our dependent clause beginning with the because word of when. Because it appears at the beginning of the sentence, we need to put a comma between the two. So let's try one more. Do you think that this sentence needs a comma? Okay, so do you think this sentence needs a comma? Let's go ahead and practice one more time. So Tamara decided to find a roommate because her rent increased by $75 a month. So go ahead and take a look at this and decide, does this sentence need any punctuation, any additional punctuation? Identify your dependent clause first, and then if it comes at the beginning of the sentence, put a comma between the two. If it comes after the independent clause, no comma is needed. Okay, so I'm again assuming that you're right. No, we don't need a comma in here at all. You'll see that I have identified the dependent clause in the white, so because her rent increased by $75 a month. It does not precede the independent clause, so I don't put any commas here. Now, do not get complex sentences confused with compound sentences. If the because in this case were a fanboys or a however or a moreover or some other conjunctive adverb, I would need a comma. So really a comma or actually a semicolon. So make sure that you really get a good understanding of all your because words. Again, if you didn't write them down, back up in the video, write them down, because that list will help you tremendously until you get all those things under your belt. So hopefully that gives you a much better understanding of complex sentences, and you can go ahead and click here if you want a little bit more information and more practice.